You think you know the Wild West, right? High noon shootouts, ruthless outlaws with itchy trigger fingers, lone cowboys riding into the sunset, dust trailing behind, maybe even a cigar-chomping sheriff standing tall against a gang of desperados. That's the version Hollywood sold us, and we bought it, boots and all. But the truth? The real Wild West was way less glamorous, and a whole lot more complicated. Movies, TV shows, and dime novels have twisted history into legend, filling our heads with cool-sounding myths that never actually happened. Today, we're busting 10 of the most ridiculous myths about the American Old West, stories we've all heard, but never really questioned. 1. Everyone wore cowboy hats. When you picture a cowboy, he's probably got that iconic wide-brimmed Stetson, right? Wrong. Back in the 1800s, the most popular hat on the frontier wasn't the cowboy hat, it was the bowler, also known as a derby. Yep, the same kind worn by bankers and city folks. It was sturdy, stayed on in the wind, and was favored by real-life figures like Butch Cassidy and Bat Masterson. While Stetsons did exist, they didn't become common until late in the century, after most of the famous Wild West stories had already passed. Cowboys wore whatever they had, military caps, floppy wool hats, even top hats. So the next time you see a film where everyone's rocking a perfect cowboy hat, remember, that's Hollywood, not history. 2. Quick draw duels were an everyday thing. The classic Western scene, two gunslingers in a dusty street, fingers twitching, the clock strikes noon, bang, one man walks away, pure fiction. Real shootouts were rare, messy, and usually happened in saloons, alleys, or over bad poker hands. There were no honorable standoffs, just chaos. Famous names like Wild Bill Hickok and Wyatt Earp avoided fair fights. They shot first because waiting often meant dying. Even the legendary gunfight at the OK Corral wasn't a duel. It was a chaotic 30-second shootout. That iconic duel, it's cinematic fantasy, not Wild West reality. 3. The West was lawless and violent. Sure, the Wild West had outlaws, but most frontier towns weren't war zones. Towns like Dodge City, Tombstone, and Deadwood had strict gun laws. Visitors were often required to hand over their weapons upon entering. And contrary to popular belief, shootouts didn't happen every day. Most people in the West were farmers, merchants, and families, just trying to survive. In fact, crime rates in many Western towns were lower than in big cities like New York or Chicago. Yes, violence happened, but more often it was fueled by alcohol and personal disputes, not random chaos. And if you broke the law, you'd face sheriffs, marshals, or even vigilante mobs. The idea that the West was pure anarchy, that's another myth. 4. Cowboys were all white Americans. Think all cowboys were rugged white guys? Think again. 1 in 4 cowboys was African American. After the Civil War, many formerly enslaved men moved west to work on ranches and became legends. Like Nat Love, a fearless black cowboy known for his skills on the trail. Mexican cowboys, or vaqueros, also shaped the culture, introducing techniques, tools, and words like rodeo, lasso, and buckaroo. Native American cowboys worked as ranch hands or served as scouts, using their deep knowledge of the land. So why do we only see white cowboys in movies? Racism and marketing. The myth of the white cowboy helped sell the idea of manifest destiny, but cowboy culture was built by a diverse mix of black, Mexican, native, and white Americans. 5. Bank robberies were common. Outlaws bursting into town, guns blazing, robbing banks. Classic Western, right? In reality, hardly ever happened. Between 1859 and 1900, there were only 8 confirmed bank robberies across the entire frontier. Why so few? Because banks weren't exactly loaded with cash. Most towns dealt in barter, gold, silver, or credit, and banks were usually well guarded. A robbery attempt could bring the whole town down on you. Just ask the James Younger gang. Their failed heist in Northfield, Minnesota ended with townspeople fighting back, killing and capturing the robbers. The real money? It was on stagecoaches and trains, carrying gold and payrolls. So all those movie heists? More fiction than fact. 6. Native Americans were always at war with settlers. Hollywood portrays Native Americans as savage raiders attacking innocent settlers. But that's a gross oversimplification. Yes, there were conflicts, especially as settlers took more land. But native tribes were diverse and complex. Many tried to coexist, trading, signing treaties, even adopting farming and written languages. Unfortunately, what they got in return was betrayal, broken promises, forced relocations, and brutal massacres. Events like the Trail of Tears, Sand Creek, and Wounded Knee weren't acts of war. They were government-sanctioned atrocities. The savage Indian image was propaganda to justify land theft. Native Americans were fighting to survive, not conquer. 7. The US cavalry were always the good guys. Cue the bugle, the cavalry riding in to save the day. But real history isn't so black and white. Yes, the cavalry protected settlers, but they also carried out horrific attacks. In 1864, the Sand Creek Massacre saw Colorado militia slaughter over 200 peaceful Cheyenne and Arapaho, many of them women and children. In 1890, nearly 300 unarmed Lakota were massacred at Wounded Knee. Not every cavalryman was a villain. Some tried to negotiate peace, but the idea of the heroic cavalry ignores the darker truths of westward expansion. The Wild West wasn't a movie. It was a brutal struggle for land, identity, and survival. 8. Women had no power in the Old West. Hollywood shows women in the West as damsels in distress or side characters, but many were far from helpless. Take Calamity Jane, a sharpshooter, military scout, and tough-as-nails survivor, or Annie Oakley, a legendary markswoman who could shoot a card mid-air before it hit the ground. Pearl Hart, she robbed a stagecoach. Yes, seriously. Many women owned saloons, ranches, and businesses. Some became doctors and politicians. In fact, Wyoming granted women the right to vote in 1869, decades before other states. Even sex workers, often called soiled doves, could earn more than male laborers and build powerful community roles. Real women of the West were tough, smart, and independent, not waiting to be rescued. 9. The gold rush made everyone rich. The Hollywood dream: strike gold, buy a saloon, retire rich. The reality: back-breaking labor, disease, and disappointment. Yes, a few people struck it rich, but most prospectors went broke or died trying. Mining was dangerous and dirty. The real winners? Merchants like Levi Strauss, who sold durable pants to miners and made millions. Eggs, shovels, and whiskey cost a fortune. And the environmental damage? Massive. Rivers polluted, forests leveled, native lands destroyed. The gold rush didn't make everyone rich. It made a few people filthy rich and left everyone else just filthy. 10. The Wild West ended in 1890. Many say the Wild West ended when the US Census declared the frontier closed in 1890. But the West didn't vanish, it just changed. Pearl Hart robbed her stagecoach in 1899. Tom Horn was executed in 1903. Geronimo, the legendary Apache leader, didn't surrender until 1886 and lived until 1909. Cowboys still roamed into the 1920s, and some even lived to watch their lives turned into Hollywood legend. The spirit of the Wild West never really died. It just put on a new costume. I hope you enjoyed this video. Do like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this.